I felt it coming. The dizzying sensation, the tightness in my chest, the flickering of lights overhead as if the universe was warning me. The words on the screen blurred together as I tried to focus on the presentation. I was just trying to get through it, just another routine update. But suddenly, everything went dark. I grabbed the podium to steady myself, but it didn't matter. My legs gave out, and I crumpled to the floor. The last thing I remember was the sharp pain in my head, and then nothing. When I woke up, the sterile smell of antiseptic hit me before I even opened my eyes. A faint beep echoed in the background, and I felt the tightness of N4 in my arm. I could barely move, but my mind was alert, racing to piece together what had happened. The nurse standing by my bed was calm, almost indifferent. "You're awake. Good. You had a mild cardiac event. Stress, likely." I nodded, but all I could focus on was the pounding in my head. I tried to speak, but my mouth felt dry. When I reached for my phone, the buzzing immediately caught my attention. 73 missed calls. I swiped through the notifications, and my heart dropped. I saw their names, my family. All the missed calls, the messages, but none of them asking if I was okay. And then I saw it. A photo from my sister. The caption read, "Family dinner without the drama." The picture was from the restaurant we always went to, the place that had always been our spot. Only this time it wasn't just the family enjoying themselves. There I was, tagged in the post with a laughing emoji under my name. I froze. They had posted it while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. They'd been celebrating without me. My name is Kara Simmons. I've always been the one to keep the peace. I was the glue that held this family together. Every birthday, every holiday, every gathering, if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't have bothered to show up. And now they were carrying on like nothing had happened. They weren't worried about me. They weren't asking if I was okay. No, they were busy enjoying their night without the drama that apparently came with me. I stared at the photo, my chest tightening. The world felt small, the walls closing in on me. But then it hit me harder than the collapse itself. I wasn't even a part of their lives anymore. I wasn't family. I was just a name, a joke, something to be tagged in the background. The thought of it made me sick. But I wasn't going to just sit here and take it. Not anymore. I glanced at my phone again. More texts. More messages from my mother, from my dad. But they weren't asking about me. They were asking about the bills. "Why didn't you pick up?" my father asked in one of his messages. "We need to talk about the finances." Finances? That was the only thing that seemed to matter. Not my health. Not that I had just collapsed in front of my coworkers. No. What mattered was the family's business. How I could help pay for their problems. How I could make sure the bills were covered. I put the phone down slowly. The words echoed in my head. We need to talk about the finances. It wasn't about me at all. It was about control. About them using me when they needed something, and then tossing me aside when they didn't. They were never there for me when I needed them. I turned off the notifications, but my heart wasn't in it. I felt cold. Betrayed. Something inside me snapped. I realized in that moment that they had taken everything from me. My time, my energy, my money, and all they had given me in return was a seat at the back of the room. But the real kicker? I had been there for them every time. Every single time. They knew I'd be the one who always showed up, the one who'd bail them out. I was their safety net, their backup plan. They never had to worry because I was there. But now, I was alone. I opened the group chat where they had been exchanging photos and stories of their family celebration. There it was again, their happiness without me. The final slap in the face came when I scrolled through the thread. I saw a message from my mom. "We need to talk like adults." But this wasn't about being an adult. This was about control. About making sure that I stayed in line, stayed reliable, stayed useful. That was it. The reality hit harder than the collapse. I realized I'd been giving, and no one had cared about me. All this time, I'd been the one holding things together, patching up the holes, making sure no one ever had to face the consequences of their own actions. But no one ever cared about me. I had been used. And now it was time to take back control. I didn't care about the dinner. I didn't care about their little celebration without me. What mattered now was that I was done. Done being the invisible one. Done being their backup. Done being the one who picked up the pieces. I made a decision. The first thing I did was open my bank app. I started with my checking account. I froze my secondary cards. Then I called the bank. I closed joint accounts. It was cold, methodical, but necessary. They weren't going to control me anymore. But as I was going through the process, a new notification popped up. Another live stream from my sister. This time, she had posted a live video at the same restaurant. Her and the family were still celebrating, still enjoying their family time. Without me. And just like the photo before, they tagged me. But this time they didn't just tag me. They made a joke about me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. They knew I was in the hospital. They knew I was struggling. And they did this anyway. That was when I realized they weren't just ignoring me. They were actively keeping me out. They were happy to leave me behind. To make me feel worthless. But now I was going to take control of my life. And it was time for them to feel what it was like to be left behind. It was late in the evening when I finally mustered the strength to get out of bed. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft beep of the machines, the sterile white walls, and the sterile scent that hung in the air. I'd been lying there for hours, scrolling through my phone, but the thoughts kept returning, circling in my mind like a shark hunting for prey. How could they? How could they just leave me like this? I had always been the one to take care of everyone. The one who made sure my family showed up, made sure they were never alone, never stranded. But when it came time for me to need them, they were nowhere to be found. I could still hear the message from my father echoing in my ears. Why didn't you pick up? I wasn't sure if he was genuinely concerned, or if he was more upset about me being unavailable to deal with his problems. My mother's message was no better. We need to talk about this. No apology. No check-in. Just an agenda. It was the same tone I had heard so many times before, the one that made me feel like I was nothing more than a tool for their convenience. I sighed deeply and scrolled through the group chat again. My sister had posted the picture of the family dinner, that mocking caption, and everyone was commenting how blessed they were. Blessed? Blessed for what? For ignoring me? For leaving me in the cold? The feeling of betrayal was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. They had already made their choice. They had already decided that I wasn't worth their time, that I was just an inconvenience. But I wasn't about to let it slide. It was time to take control. I sat up and grabbed my phone, still shaken by the messages I had received. The tears that had threatened to fall all day were now coming in full force, but I didn't let them spill. No, I was done crying over people who didn't care about me. I opened my banking app and stared at the screen for a long moment, the familiar balance staring back at me. But it wasn't just a balance, it was a tool they had used against me. Every bill, every shared account, every expense had been done through me. My family had relied on me for everything, but it was clear now that they had never really cared about me. I started the process of freezing my secondary cards. My finger hovered over the screen for a long time before I confirmed it. There was a sense of finality to it, but I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. I had been their financial safety net for too long. It was time for me to let go. The bank's app asked if I was sure. The little confirmation message popped up, but there was no turning back. I was done being the one they could always count on. I didn't feel any better as I continued through the app. One by one, I began closing joint accounts, canceling the credit cards linked to them, and removing myself from the bills I had been paying for years. It wasn't about the money, not really, it was about finally regaining control. I took a deep breath as I reached the final account. The last joint checking account. The one I had always kept open for emergencies. The one I had always thought I needed to keep open, so they would feel safe. But I was done. They had never cared about me enough to check on me when I needed them, and now, it was time for them to feel the consequences of their actions. I closed the account, and immediately felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The silence in the hospital room was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful, almost. But then my phone buzzed again. It was my mother. This time it was a video call. I let it ring, and I watched the screen as it vibrated on the table next to me. For a brief moment, I considered answering. Maybe I could finally have the conversation I'd been wanting to have. Maybe she'd apologize. Maybe she'd show me some understanding. But no. I swiped it away, rejecting the call without even glancing at it. They didn't deserve my attention anymore. Just as I was about to put my phone down, a new notification came through, a text from my sister. The words sent a chill down my spine. Mom is really upset, Kara. This isn't just about the money. It was clear now that the mask had slipped. This wasn't about money. It was about control. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could give them. But now I had taken that power away. I was no longer their source of support. I wasn't going to be their fallback. Not anymore. And as the text message appeared, the truth hit me with the force of a tidal wave. They were never going to change. They would never see me for who I truly was. I wasn't the problem, they were. But then, Just as I was starting to feel the anger settle in my stomach like a heavy stone, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my father this time. He wrote simply, "I need you to call me back. This is serious." I didn't know what to expect when I woke up the next morning. The hospital room was just as cold, just as sterile as the day before, but something inside me had shifted. Something deep, something I couldn't ignore. My body still ached, my chest heavy with the strain of the past few days, but I no longer felt the weight of their absence. I felt free. It was strange, this feeling of freedom, almost foreign. For years, I'd been tied to my family. Tied to their needs, their emergencies, their drama. I had been the one to step in, to solve their problems, to patch the holes they left behind. But now, the silence that followed their absence wasn't suffocating. It was a relief. I glanced at my phone again, the notifications still piling up. My father's missed calls. My sister's texts. My mother's pleading messages. The constant hum of their attempts to reach me, to get me back in the fold. But this time I wasn't answering. I couldn't. The truth had hit me like a ton of bricks. They didn't care about me. They never had. They had used me, taken from me, and when it was no longer convenient, they left me to pick up the pieces on my own. The thing was, I was done picking up their pieces. The decision had been made. I wasn't going to let them do this to me anymore. I needed to take control of my life, my finances, my future. And it started here. My hand hovered over my phone screen as I opened the banking app again. I couldn't help but stare at the account balances, the shared credit cards, the auto payments linked to my accounts. For years, I had been the one to handle everything, the one to make sure the bills were paid, the one who took care of every little thing. It was my responsibility, my burden. But I wasn't carrying it anymore. I started with the joint accounts. They were the easiest. A quick call to the bank, and it was done. Then I moved to the credit cards. I froze them. All of them. My hands shook slightly, but it was liberating. The money I had been pouring into these accounts, into these obligations, it was no longer mine to manage. The thought of them trying to access it without me there to control it sent a wave of satisfaction through me. But as I canceled the last card, I paused. A text came through from my father again. "Are you done with this childishness? We're family." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. The urge to respond, to argue, was overwhelming. But I resisted. Because I was done. I wasn't going to apologize for taking back what was mine. I wasn't going to fall back into their trap. Not this time. I let the text go unanswered and closed the app. My next step was to start taking back my health. The feeling of betrayal was still fresh in my mind, but now I could see clearly. I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their web of manipulation. I turned my attention to my phone again, this time scrolling past the messages from family. It was time to deal with something I had been avoiding for far too long. I had been their financial safety net, their emotional anchor, for so long that it was easy to forget what I needed. I had been drowning in their expectations, their demands, and in their constant need for reassurance. But I had forgotten to reassure myself. I glanced at the list of things I had to do to cut ties, things I'd been putting off for years. I was about to start with the hardest one. I opened my medical portal to remove their access. It was time to set boundaries, real ones. I started with the basics, removing their names from emergency contacts. Then I added a note. All medical access is revoked. Please contact the patient directly. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. For the first time in years, I was the one in control. But as I finished the task, another message popped up. This one was from my sister, with a picture attached. She had sent it while I was busy cutting off the last of their ties. The photo was taken at the very dinner they had left me out of. It was a snapshot of my mother, father, and sister. They were sitting at a table, smiling, but what caught my eye wasn't their faces. It was the glass of wine in front of my mother. The wine glass that had been sitting in front of her the entire time she had been worried about me. I felt a surge of anger, hotter than before. This wasn't just about the money. This was about control. They had planned this. They had orchestrated the distance, the neglect. And now, they were using me as their scapegoat, the one who could be cast aside when they no longer needed me. I put the phone down, the anger bubbling beneath the surface. I was no longer just hurt. I was angry, and that anger burned deep. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about taking back my life. It was about showing them that I wasn't the one who needed them anymore. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, focusing on the next steps. The weight of my decision was heavy, but I wasn't afraid of it. This was the new beginning I needed. The days following my decision to sever ties felt both empty and fulfilling. I spent hours in the hospital room, organizing my thoughts, setting up a new bank account, and updating my medical records. The changes were small at first, removing my family's names from emergency contacts, switching my phone plan, and updating my passwords. But each task felt like a victory. I could finally breathe without the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. The silence was no longer deafening. It was my space, my time, my life. But even as I continued to make these changes, the guilt crept in, lurking in the background. I wondered if I had made the right choice. Had I really cut them off? Or had I just lost the family I had fought so hard to protect? The message from my sister had been the final straw. It was like everything I had been holding inside, all the frustration, all the anger, had finally come pouring out. They hadn't just ignored me, they had planned it. They were pretending to care, to be worried, while continuing with their lives without a second thought. And that's when I realized something important. I was done being their backup. The hospital room became my sanctuary. I didn't have to worry about what anyone else thought. I didn't have to feel guilty for choosing myself over them. I started taking steps that would secure my future, one action at a time. I found a new place to stay, secured a better job opportunity that didn't rely on my family's influence, and started setting up a life that didn't include their toxic presence. The real challenge, I knew, was going to be what came next. Because once they realized I wasn't answering anymore, once they saw I wasn't coming back into their fold, I knew they would fight for control. They would try anything to regain their hold over me. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I was Kara Simmons, and I was ready to reclaim my life. I had barely started to settle into my new life when the messages came flooding in. At first, I ignored them. The silence in the hospital room was peaceful, but now, I could feel the old chaos creeping back. I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to reach me, to pull me back into the life I was desperately trying to escape. My phone buzzed again, the familiar ping of my sister's name. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the message. Part of me wanted to read it. Part of me wanted to know what kind of excuse she would come up with this time. But I knew it was just another manipulation, just another way to get me back into their grasp. I turned the screen face down and pushed the phone aside. But the buzzing didn't stop. Every few minutes, a new notification popped up. My father, my mother, even my cousin. They were all trying to get in touch. It felt like an invasion. Like they were clawing at the door of my new life, desperate to pull me back into the same toxic cycle. I sat up and took a deep breath. It wasn't just about the phone anymore. The texts, the missed calls, they were starting to feel like more than just inconveniences. They were a reminder of everything I was running from. My family, with their endless demands, their constant need for attention, their expectations. They had used me for so long, and now that I was finally breaking free, they couldn't stand it. The messages weren't just about missing me. They were about regaining control. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from my mother. "Please call me," the text read. "We need to talk. You can't just cut us off like this. You're hurting the family." The guilt hit like a ton of bricks. I wanted to pick up. I wanted to explain everything, to tell her why I had to do this. But then I remembered the photo, the laughing emoji under my name, the complete disregard for my health. I remembered how I had been discarded when I needed them the most. And the guilt faded, replaced by anger. I opened the group chat. I didn't know why I did it, but something pushed me to check. There it was again. Another family dinner. Another photo. This time, it was just my parents, standing in front of the house. They were smiling, pretending everything was perfect. My sister wasn't even in the picture, but my name was. And under it, "We miss you. Come home." I stared at it for a long time. The words hit me harder than I expected. They missed me? Was that why they had been so quiet? No, it wasn't that simple. They missed what I could do for them, what I had always done. They missed the way I filled the gaps in their lives, the way I made things work. They didn't miss me. They missed the control they had over me. I put the phone down again, my hands shaking. I had thought I was done with them. I had thought I could finally move on, but the realization hit me like a freight train. They weren't just my family. They were the reason I had been stuck for so long. They were the reason I had forgotten who I was. And now, they were going to do everything they could to bring me back into the fold. The decision was made. I couldn't let them have this power over me anymore. The texts, the calls, the guilt trips, they didn't stop, but I wasn't backing down. If I had to fight for my peace, for my independence, I would. The first step was to get the law involved. I wasn't sure where to begin, but I knew I couldn't handle this on my own anymore. The weight of it all, my family's demands, their manipulation, was too much to bear. So I called a lawyer. The first time I heard his voice, I knew it was the right decision. He was calm, reassuring, but firm. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "Let's get everything in order. We'll make sure your family understands that you're no longer a safety net for them." It was the reassurance I needed. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to tell me that my decision wasn't wrong, that I wasn't crazy for wanting to walk away from all of this. The lawyer worked quickly. He helped me freeze all accounts, initiate fraud alerts, and prepare the paperwork to ensure my family had no further access to my personal life. I remember the first time I signed the papers, my hands still shaking. The weight of what I was doing finally hit me. I wasn't just cutting off a few credit cards. I was cutting off a life I had known for years. I was tearing away the ties that had bound me to them, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of freedom. But it was also terrifying. What would happen when they found out? How far would they go to get me back? The phone calls became more intense. My father called again, but this time his tone was different. "We've tried to reach you, Kara. You can't just shut us out like this. You're ruining everything." But the truth was, everything had already been ruined. I wasn't the one who had abandoned them. They had abandoned me the moment they chose to ignore my collapse. The family dinner photos, the texts, the messages, they were just the tip of the iceberg. What they didn't realize was that they had already lost me. A few days later, I received another letter, this time from my father's lawyer. They were threatening legal action. They wanted to take me to court for the accounts I had closed, the actions I had taken without their consent. They were trying to claim that I had overstepped my bounds, that I was acting irrationally, that I needed help. It was the same script they had used all along. And this time, they were going to make me pay for it. But I wasn't backing down. This wasn't about money or power. This was about me finally taking control of my life. I sat there, holding the letter in my hands, and realized that this wasn't just a family dispute. This was a war. A battle for my independence. A battle I wasn't going to lose. They would fight me every step of the way, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The letter from my father's lawyer had been a gut punch. I stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling as I held the pages. This wasn't just a request for money or a plea for reconciliation. No, this was a threat. A demand. They were trying to drag me back into their world, and it had crossed a line. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling of their control tightening around me. They wanted me back. They wanted me to fall in line. But the truth was I was done. The family I had tried so hard to please, to keep together, had shown me who they really were. They were a group of people who only cared about themselves. They didn't care about me, about my health, my well-being, or the fact that I had been there for them when no one else was. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the accounts or the power they thought they had over me. It was about their refusal to see me as a person with my own needs, my own boundaries, my own life. I needed to make sure they understood that. I called my lawyer again, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "We need to prepare for a battle," I said as calmly as I could manage. "They're not going to let this go. They're going to come after me." He was reassuring, telling me I was doing the right thing, but I could hear the urgency in his voice, too. "We'll make sure your rights are protected," he promised. "They can't just take your life away from you." His words brought me a small amount of comfort, but I knew that the fight ahead was going to be long and difficult. And the closer I got to the reality of what I had to do, the more I realized that there was no going back. But then came the text. From my sister. "Please, Kara. Just listen to me. We're all trying to fix things. Please stop this before it goes too far." It was almost too much to handle. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. The old me, the one who had always tried to keep things together, would have responded, would have apologized, would have tried to make things work. But not anymore. No more appeasing. No more fixing their mistakes. I took a deep breath and typed back. "It's too late. You've already crossed a line." The moment I sent that message, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't trying to fix the broken pieces of their lives. But the fight wasn't over yet. The legal battle was just beginning, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. A few hours later, my lawyer called me back with news. "They're serious about this, Kara," he said. "They've escalated things. The court hearing is scheduled for next week." I didn't respond at first. The thought of standing in front of a judge, having to fight for my own independence, for my right to live my life without their interference, made my stomach churn. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. The days leading up to the court hearing felt like an eternity. I spent every waking moment preparing, gathering evidence, organizing everything I had learned about my family's manipulations. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep the web of control had stretched. My father, my mother, my sister, they had all taken something from me. It wasn't just money. It was my time, my energy, my trust. And now I had to face them in a courtroom. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The morning of the hearing arrived, and I stood outside the courthouse, feeling a mixture of dread and determination. The weight of what I was about to do pressed on me, but I knew I had no other choice. This wasn't just about protecting my finances or my health. This was about reclaiming my life, my identity. I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer, my heart pounding in my chest. The opposing side was already there. My family's lawyer, sitting beside my father and mother. My sister wasn't with them, but I could feel her presence in the air. She was part of this, too. Part of the reason I was here, fighting for my independence. My father barely looked at me as I entered the room. He sat there, stoic, arms crossed. My mother's eyes were cold, her face a mask of indifference. They hadn't even considered the possibility that I might be done with them, that I might be strong enough to walk away. But I was. And I was going to prove it. The hearing was long and tense, filled with legal jargon and accusations. My family's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, as irrational, as someone who didn't know what was best for her own life. They tried to make it seem like I was the problem, like I was the one who had abandoned them. But with each question, each piece of evidence I presented, I felt myself growing stronger. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't about the accounts. This was about showing them that I was no longer their pawn. I was no longer their safety net. I was Kara Simmons, and I was done being invisible. The most shocking moment of the hearing came when my father took the stand. For a moment, I thought he might finally admit that he had treated me unfairly, that he understood why I had to do what I did. But instead, he said something that made my blood run cold. "I did what I had to do," he said, his voice steady, unyielding. Kara was always the one who kept things together. She was the one who held the family up. But now she's taking everything away from us. This isn't just about money. This is about control. She's trying to control us. She's trying to destroy everything we've built. My heart sank. He didn't get it. He still didn't understand. He didn't see me, didn't see my pain, my sacrifice. He only saw his loss, his control slipping through his fingers. And that was when I realized something that took me completely by surprise. He wasn't just angry. He was scared. Scared that he was losing the power he had over me. I sat there frozen as his words echoed in my ears. He wasn't speaking about me, he was speaking about himself. And that was the moment everything changed. I realized that this battle wasn't just for me. It was for my future. For my freedom. I stood up, my heart racing. It was time to show him that I was no longer afraid. The courtroom was suffocating. The air seemed thick with tension, every second dragging longer than the last. I could feel my palms sweat as I sat at the table, my lawyer by my side, preparing for the final moments of the hearing. My family was on the other side, stone-faced, pretending as if they weren't breaking apart inside. But I could see through it. I could see the cracks in their perfect facade. I was done being the one to hold everything together. I had spent too many years sacrificing my own well-being to make sure they were okay. Now I was standing my ground. The judge, an older woman with kind but firm eyes, had been watching everything with a quiet intensity. She'd heard it all. The accusations, the defenses, the attempts to make me seem irrational. But it was clear, even to her, that this wasn't about finances or control. This was about the years of neglect, of being taken for granted, of being ignored when I needed them most. The tension in the room was palpable. I knew they were going to fight until the very end, but I was ready. The lawyer for my family had been doing everything in his power to paint me as the villain, but every time he spoke, my lawyer countered with facts. With proof. And it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my life, my freedom, my right to exist without constantly being manipulated and controlled. "Your Honor," the opposing lawyer said, standing up to address the judge. "My client, Mr. Simmons, has been the pillar of his family for decades. He has always taken care of his daughter, supported her, and put her needs before his own. And now she has abandoned him. She has abandoned this family." My heart sank. There it was again, his attempt to turn everything around to make me the bad guy. He was still trying to control the narrative, but I wasn't going to let him. I stood up slowly, my voice clear and steady. "Your Honor, I have spent my entire life being the one who held everything together. I was the one who paid the bills, the one who cleaned up the messes, the one who made sure my family was okay. But I've been ignored. I've been manipulated. And I am done. I am no longer going to be the person who sacrifices everything for people who don't care about me. The room went silent. My family's lawyer looked taken aback. My father's face was unreadable, but I could see the flicker of emotion in my mother's eyes, a mixture of guilt and resentment. She wasn't going to fight for me. She was going to fight to keep her position in the family. And I was no longer going to let her. I continued, my voice rising in strength. This isn't just about the money. This is about control. I've been controlled for so long, and I've had enough. I am taking back my life. I don't want your money, your help, or your apologies. I want my freedom. The judge looked at me for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. The weight of the words I had just spoken hung in the air, the room heavy with silence. I could feel the tension in my chest, the fear and uncertainty that had plagued me for so long. But this time I wasn't afraid. This time I was in control. Mr. Simmons, the judge said, turning to my father, your daughter has made her case clear. Now you must understand that she has the right to live her life as she sees fit. No one has the right to control her. I had won. The court hearing had ended, and the judgment was clear. My family no longer had control over me. The legal battle was over. But the emotional aftermath was just beginning. I walked out of the courtroom with my lawyer, the weight of the victory settling in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt free. I had taken back control of my life. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. But there was still so much to process. I didn't know what my family's next move would be, but I knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't let them use me anymore. And even though the battle was over, the scars from the years of manipulation and neglect would take time to heal. I sat in my car, staring out the window at the busy city street in front of me. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel suffocated. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for them. How I had given up my own happiness, my own health, my own life to make sure they were okay. But no more. I was done. The family I had fought so hard for had abandoned me, and now I was taking my life back. I started the car and drove to my new apartment. The place I had secured for myself. It was small, but it was mine. I didn't need anything grand. I didn't need their approval. All I needed was my freedom. The door to my new apartment creaked open, and I stepped inside. The empty walls echoed around me, but instead of feeling loneliness, I felt peace. The kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I set my bags down, looking around at the blank canvas before me. This was where I would build my new life. This was where I would finally be free from their expectations. I wasn't just reclaiming my space. I was reclaiming who I was. And that was the most important thing of all. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment to take it all in. For the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. The past was gone. The future was mine. As I sat down on the couch, my phone buzzed again. One new message. It was from my sister. Please, Kara, we need to talk. I didn't hesitate. I didn't pick up. Not this time.